Hello, class. In the last lesson, we started our part two of our skeletal system sections, and we talked about our cranial bones of our skull. Today, we're going to focus on the 14 facial bones that make up our skull. A lot of these bones are located in pairs, which means there's two of these bones that join together or are fused together, except for the vomer and the mandible. So the first bone is the maxillae. The next one is your palatine, lacrimal, zygomatic bones, nasal, vomer, inferior nasal conchae, and mandible. Again, all of these bones are paired, which means there's two of them, except for your vomer and your mandible. Let's go through each of these bones. The first one that we're going to talk about is your maxillary bone, or if we are going to make it plural, it's maxillae. These are going to be fused bones that form the upper jaw. So if you think about where your upper teeth are, that is your maxillary bone. All bones except the mandible join to the maxillae in some fashion. This is considered a keystone bone because all of these other bones attach to it. Your maxillae carry your upper teeth in something called an alveolar process. And there are extensions called palatine processes, and they form the anterior means the front part of your hard palate of your mouth. If you guys don't know what your hard palate is, it is the roof of your mouth. If you actually reach up and touch the roof of your mouth, it's hard because the hard palate is made up of bone. So here is an example of the maxilla as a lateral view. It is illustrated here in purple. Again, every bone fuses to it in some way. That's part of your face. So we have the upper part of our teeth, as well as lower parts of kind of our nose area. Where the teeth connect is our alveolar process. A different view is if you were looking from underneath an inferior view of the skull. The maxilla forms the front part or anterior part of your hard palate or roof of your mouth. And we can see that right in here. The other type of bone is your palatine bone. This is paired bones that lie on the back half or posterior. So again, posterior is the back part of the hard palate. So if we go back to this picture, this is where we see our palatine bone illustrated here in gray. It is the very back half of the roof of your mouth. If you ever hear the word like, oh, you have a good palate, that has to do with you tasting food, eating food, it's the roof of your mouth. 4 other bones, and we're going to show each of these in images as well. The first one is your zygomatic bone. This is another word. It refers basically to your cheekbones. But not only does it form your cheekbones, but it does form the lateral. Lateral is going to be the outside walls of your orbits or your eye cavity. So your zygomatic bone right here, again, it forms your cheeks, but also here's your eye cavity. It's going to form over here this outside wall on either side. Here, if we're looking at it from this view, we have our zygomatic bone. We see our big cheekbone where we have a bunch of muscles can attach, but then up here, we still have that outer wall. The next one are your lacrimal bones. These are very, very small facial bones. They're about the size of a fingernail, and they form part of the medial wall of your eye orbit. So whenever we think of medial, that is going to be the inside wall of your eye. Each bone has a groove, and in that groove, through this bone, is where your passageway for tears is occurring. So when you cry, it's coming through a little bone marking for tears. So our lacrimal is going to be right here. Lacrimal is this green portion on the very, very inside or medial side of your eye orbit. Think about when you cry, it's coming down from the inside of your eye. Over here is a kind of a better view of your lacrimal bone. It's right here in green. The next one, hopefully this one's easier to remember, is your nasal bone. Nasal, think of your nose. This is rectangular bones that form the bridge of your nose before it turns to cartilage. So over here, the nasal bone is right here. It's in dark blue. Again, it forms the bridge or up towards the top of your nose before it turns into cartilage. Here's another view. Your nasal bone, again, the very top bridge part of your nose, kind of where you rest your glasses if you had to wear them. And the last one on this slide is your vomer bone. This is a single bone and it forms the middle, so that's the very median or middle part of your nasal cavity. It actually forms the bottom half of your nasal septum. And if you ever hear the word septum, it means to separate. So the parts of your nasal, it's separated from left and right nostrils, is where you're going to find that vomer. So the vomer, again, here's the vomer. It forms that very bottom half that separates your right and left nostrils. You can't see the vomer on this side, unfortunately, because this is a side view. Other facial bones include the inferior nasal conchae. These are thin, curved bones projecting medially from the lateral walls of the nasal cavity. So the word nasal should give it away that it's near the nose. Inferior means it's below. So it's kind of a bone that projects out of the bottom of the nasal. So we can't really see it in this one because we need to be looking straight forward at the nose. So if we're looking straight forward at the nose, here is our nasal concha. We have over here, inferior means below. Now this term nasal concha should sound familiar because we did talk about its projection, the middle nasal concha as being part of the ethmoid bone. This in itself, the inferior one, is its own facial bone. Concha is going to pop back up in your respiratory system chapter. Those are a lot of bony projections that air kind of circulates through in your nose to kind of warm it and trap any bacteria or disease that could possibly be in the air that you're breathing in before it makes its way down to your lungs. And the next one is your mandible. Mandible is your largest and strongest bone in your face, and we call it the lower jaw. It forms the horizontal part of your chin. And then there are two upright parts called rami, and it connects your mandible to your temporal bone on the sides of your skull. Your mandible, just like your maxillae, do contain alveolar processes, and these alveolar processes are going to contain your lower teeth. Like we said on the skull lesson that we had the previous class period, the mandible is actually your only freely movable joint. You move it every single time that you open your mouth to talk or make facial expressions. So over here we have the mandible. Again, the mandible's in red. So the entire thing is the mandible. Here it makes the horizontal part of your chin. In this vertical part is still the mandible, but we call it a ramus or rami. Over here, this is a front view of our mandible. Again, attaches. Just like with our cranial bones, we talked about sutures. Within our facial bones, we're going to notice a lot of sinuses. And sinuses are just hollow portions of the bone that surround that nasal cavity. And this includes several cranial and a facial bone. It includes the frontal bone, because we get a frontal sinus, the ethmoid sinus, the sphenoidal sinus, and the maxillary sinus. The functions of these sinuses is to help lighten the skull, so make it, again, not as heavy lighter for when it rests on your vertebrae, but also it helps amplify sounds made as we speak. With these open, hollow portions of bones, there can be drawbacks, and one of the big ones is um, sinusitis, which is infection of your sinuses. This is also where you tend to feel a lot of pressure when you get buildup for headaches. Because again, the symptoms of this kind of infection include headaches or even upper jaw pain. Here is an image to kind of show where these different paranasal sinuses are. And if you've ever noticed when you're kind of stuffy or you're starting to get sick, you get a kind of an infection, you feel clogged in these areas. We got, again, our frontal sinuses, part of our frontal bone, our ethmoid sinus, our sphenoidal sinus kind of in here, and then sphenoidal sinus kind of right here by our ethmoid, and then our maxillary sinus right here on either side of our nose. So this is an anterior view, and here is more of a medial lateral part of our view where we find headaches in these areas. Last but not least, this is actually not really part of our skull, but we do still talk about it because it doesn't really form any joints with anything in our body, and that is the hyoid bone. It is closely related to the mandible and temporal bones. It is kind of a horseshoe shaped if you're trying to think of what it looks like. And it is the only bone that does not articulate. And you guys not learned this word, but articulate means join or forms a joint with another bone. In fact, it's kind of suspended in your mid-neck part of your body, and it's just anchored by ligaments. It's not directly forming a joint with the styloid process of the temporal bone. It's held in place by ligaments. And it's a very important bone because it serves as a movable base for your tongue, and it helps us with swallowing or aids in us forming certain parts of our speech. If you're curious, here is the horseshoe shaped. It's right here in your neck. And that's the end of today's lesson. If you have any questions, please make sure that you ask. And I hope you guys have a great day.